In this video, we're going to show you how to install the drawer side front lower rearward control arm bushing on your Ford 500 located at the back side of the control arm. The process for this is the same as the passenger side. Now if you have a hubcap, go ahead and give that a gentle tug outward, pop that off and set it aside. Using your 19mm socket, loosen and remove the 5 lug nuts. Grab your wheel, pull it off, and set it aside. Using a 21mm wrench, we want to go ahead, loosen and remove the lower ball joint nut. Now if the ball joint shaft is spinning like ours is, you now want to go ahead and put a wrench on the hexagon portion of the ball joint here. We're using a 3/8 inch wrench. And tap that on. Ours is a little rusty, so the nut is going, the wrench is going on tight. And we're going to use that wrench, spin it until it hits the back of the knuckle and it works as a stopper. Then we can proceed to loosening the nut. Now you won't be able to remove the nut because when you pull it up, it'll hit the axle. The forward mounted bolt on our lower control arm is an 18mm. We're going to use an 18mm swivel. And we're just going to snap the rust off like that. On the rearward portion of the control arm, there are 2 bolts right here. These are 15mm. They go through into the top to an 18mm nut. So I'm going to put a box wrench on the top, hold the nut, and loosen and remove the bolt. Do the same for the back bolt. Using our pry bar, we're going to gently work that ball joint out. Go ahead and remove that nut. I'm going to use our pry bar to work the control arm out of the chassis. Now as we work the rear mount and bushing out of the chassis, be careful of this control arm. If it drops, it will hurt if it hits you. Now we put our control arm into a vise. We want to take into consideration the position of this bushing that we're going to be replacing. This has a notch in it. This is also lined up with the arm itself. So when we install the correct or the new part, we want to make sure that it lines up the correct way. Now we try to tap this off with our hammer. It didn't want to come off. We're going to go to our air chisel and just work this off gently. I'm going to add a thin coat of grease to the unit here. Now if you have any type of rust buildup or any scaly rust on there, you definitely want to clean that first. Make sure that you install the bushing facing the correct direction. I'm just using a dead blow hammer or a rubber mallet. There you have it. Now before we install our lower control arm, I'm going to use our jack underneath our brake rotor. Be careful not to crush the backing plate. So you want to jack just the rotor. And by doing this, it's going to pull everything out a little bit. You don't want to do it too far because you don't want to separate the axle. Now we have the rear bushing bolt holes lined up. I'm going to use some blue Loctite on the threads here, just as I had it from the factory. Push one of the bolts up, get the nut started, and if you can, I like to thread them down as far as you can by hand. Do the same for the other. Now at this point here, I'm going to lower the pole jack here. Remove that, set that aside. want to keep on working that control arm up and in until our hole lines up here. And we have about half the hole lined up there. Give this a few more loving bonks here. And on the inside here, you can see partial portion of the control arm hole. I'm going to use a large screwdriver here and basically just kind of put that in there and twist that over. Let's put our bolt in there, gently work that around. Once we have that bolt set in there, just tap it in. And then once it comes to the other side, we can go ahead and put our nut on there. Go ahead and get your socket up in there with your extension. And I'm going to get this caught by hand first. Make sure that the threads catch. You don't want to cross thread that bolt with an impact tool right away or ever. And we just want that bolt to gently seat. Do not tighten this yet. Tighten down the two rear bolts here. Torque the two rearward bolts to 73 foot-pounds. Now before tightening down or torquing the front control arm lower bolt, the suspension needs to be in its fully compressed position. So what you want to do, one of two options: lower the vehicle down to the ground with a wheel on it, put the suspension or the vehicle weight under the suspension so it compresses it, and then torque it. Or you can use your jack underneath the control arm and go ahead, raise up the suspension until the vehicle just starts to come off of your jack stands. What we're doing is compressing that suspension and compressing that strut, getting our suspension into what we call a neutral ride height. Let's go ahead and torque down our bolt here to 111 foot-pounds. There we go. Let's go ahead and lower your suspension. Now I want to go ahead and install our nut onto the ball joint. Now if you can't get that in, well, which in this case we can, if you can't fit that in there, you can simply use a pry bar, gently go between the knuckle and the control arm, just gently push that control arm down so you can fit that nut into place. Let's thread that on, and we'll get that bottomed out. Using a 21mm wrench, go ahead and tighten down our ball joint nut. Now if you get to a point like us where the ball joint stud is rotating with the nut, I'm going to use a 10mm wrench on the top. Use it as a stopper and then we'll tighten down the nut. All right, now that we have this snug, if you have the ability to do so, you want to torque down this nut to 111 foot-pounds. After your lower ball joint has been torqued into place, go ahead and install your wheel. Go ahead and bring the vehicle down to your local alignment shop and get that taken care of. Go ahead and line up the wheel with the lug nuts. Install all of the lug nuts by hand first, or at least get them started a few threads. Once these are all started, we'll go ahead and snug them down. Using your torque wrench, go ahead and torque the lug nuts down to 95 foot-pounds. Now when installing the hubcap here, you want to go ahead and make sure that the little notch lines up with the valve stem. You're all set.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.